Thanks to everybody for coming on early Sunday morning after probably a late Saturday night. Thanks. It means a lot to us to show up this early in the morning. I'm Jim Coudal. This is Michael Lopp. That's John Gruber. We're doing something a little different. We're not generally fans of panels, but we wanted to do something together. So instead of doing a panel, we're each doing a small presentation. And to make it more confusing, we are doing the same slides in our presentation. It's a little bit about writing, and it's a little bit about the creative process, and an important thing about writing is editing. So as you can see, we've already ditched 3 of the slides, and we're down to 12. So. I'm going to go first, then Michael, then John. We're going to go through it and hopefully be done with plenty of time for some discussion and questions and answers. It's not really a writing workshop or anything like that. It's more like maybe it's going to be instructive and hopefully interesting to see the way the 3 different people approach the same thing. So with that. Oh, yeah, and we're supposed to have a hashtag, so if anybody has a good idea, shout it out, and we'll call that the official hashtag.
12 slides?
What? 15 minus 3? Okay.
15
minus 3 is the hashtag.
Sweet.
Thank you very much. I'm Jim Coudal. I run Coudal Partners in Chicago. We do a number of things. We're a small creative group. We do a number of things. We run an ad network called The Deck. We run some consumer brands, Field Notes brands, notably notebooks and other things. And we put things on the web like layer tennis and crazy movies and other things. So, are we there? Forward, yeah, forward. We all 3 of us are different sorts of writers. I generally write a lot of short posts and a lot of business communication and occasionally a long, more creative piece. Michael tends to write longer pieces and books, and John writes longer pieces interspersed by shorter pieces as well as occasional magazine articles. So hopefully the way that we approach the writing that we do, it'll be, hopefully we're not going to all say the same thing 3 times, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, so. Our first slide, go to the next slide. In this day and age, it's sort of like, how do you know what you're going to write? I run a firm where I'm working on Field Notes 1 minute and layer tennis the next minute and writing an email the next minute, and there's no sort of assignment sort of thing. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get to work most days. I know it has to be done, but I don't really have an assignment. Aside from that, however, I have found that the best way to do creative work is to do it when you have something you don't want to do as a deadline hanging over your head. So, for example, if it's Thursday afternoon at 4 and you've got to get a big presentation together for the first thing on Friday, that's an excellent time to come up with a new project and start doing it. So, it actually is true. In fact, I've tried to sort of tame that because I find that in avoiding one project, it frees me up creatively on another project. So maybe that's one idea about assigning yourself an article. Next. In traditional writing, there's a writer and an editor and a copy editor and a proofreader, and usually an assignment is made. Here's an idea for an article, and why don't you do a draft and send it to me, and we'll see how that works, and then you do your next draft, and we'll have somebody go over it for fact-checking, and then, maybe we'll cut out a section, and we'll come up with a nice headline and a cut line, and we'll publish the thing. I don't think for any of us that's really the process anymore. So these days, you're sort of working without a net, meaning that all of those support roles were always a good way to catch factual errors and unclear thinking and grammar and typographical errors. And now we don't have any of that. So it sort of makes for a different process in the writing process in which you're not only assigning yourself the work, but you're also writing it and editing and proofreading it. I wonder if that's a good thing or not, but it seems like that's the way it is. So next one, please. So you've decided you have to do something, you have to get something done, you have to write something today, tomorrow, and then you need to get started. There's sort of that idea that the blank page is sort of a terrifying thing. For me personally, I tend to give a piece a headline before I even know what I'm going to write. And generally speaking, I take the headline from the name of a book or a movie, and it may or may not have anything to do with what I'm writing. But for me, to look at the page with an actual headline that feels like a real thing. If I'm writing a newsletter for Field Notes, I might call it The Sound and the Fury, which doesn't have anything to do with the letter, and the headline will never exist after the draft of the letter. But to look at a page that says The Sound and the Fury, it seems like a real thing, and in a way I've sort of cheated myself that I've actually already started. So maybe that's a way that I sort of avoid that, oh, what the hell am I going to do with this clicking cursor, you know? So for me, that's something. Related to that is how you actually write a draft. And we talked a little bit, and I think we all have a completely different approach to this. For me, I just blast through. I just go as fast as I can. I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry about organization. I just go and go and go until I can't go anymore. And for me, that allows me that now I have something that I'm working on. Generally speaking, the final product might be completely different from what I've blasted through, but at least I've got my basic thoughts outlined, whether it's a creative piece or even in a business communication. And I can go back and edit that and turn it into the piece that I think that I want it to be. Somebody said about sculpture once that it's really easy to do a beautiful sculpture of an eagle. All you need is to take a block of marble and chip away the parts that don't look like an eagle. And that's sort of the idea I have with the editing process is to get it on there, and in the process of revising and correcting grammar and reorganizing, the thought sort of emerges. I think that it does. So. You can go to the next one. Everybody has their own little crutches that they use, or their own little quirky things they use in writing. For me, I like to write on a live web page, and nobody else can see but me. But I don't know why. But I've always done it where I write in BB Edit, and I'm actually writing in HTML on a server and publishing it every time I revise it. So I'm writing in BB Edit, but I'm reading it on a web page that actually has CSS, that's formatted. And for me, I think you'll see some people like to print things out and write them, but for me, it makes a huge difference between the act of writing and the act of reading. And when we're our own proofreaders and our own editors, it's very difficult to read what you've written and not hear the voice in your head that was there when you wrote it. So it becomes very difficult to proofread your own work. I mean, I think that's sort of true of anything, design work, or it's very difficult to look at an edit of a film that you made without replaying the decisions that you made in your head, as opposed to trying to see it with a more objective eye. So my foible for me is I just crank it up on the web server and load the page in Safari, and I proof it in Safari, and I write it in BB Edit.
I just want to go on the record, that terrifies me. I'm never
Well, usually since I have a title to the thing that doesn't have anything to do with what I'm writing, it would be sort of difficult to find it, although that might be kind of an interesting site, like watchmewrite.com or something. Okay, the next one. Do I go on the hook? I came originally from an advertising background, and as a art director and copywriter, and worked many times in two-person teams in advertising and in design and copywriting. And so my idea about the hook, or my idea of what's this article about, or what's the kernel of this, sort of relates to the way you might create a print ad or a billboard, where you sort of try to boil everything down to the essential piece of information and then hopefully make it entertaining or instructive or interesting in some way. So, it's sort of that Fairfax Cone unique selling proposition idea. At least for me, that's how I sort of come to a hook. I approach it as if it's an ad. You go to the next one. And related to that is how do we come up with like that first line, the lead, like, the guy who wrote the article for the New York Post that was headless body found in topless bar. Like, how do you not read that article? So the idea is that, or the Inquirer might have said, stooge you like, key to personality, experts say. All these idea of a headline, a grabber. For me, I would like to sort of think that you could take anything I wrote, whether it was creatively or whether it was a newsletter or whether it was a blog post, and you could add the words, let me tell you a story at the beginning, and it would work. So that's sort of my idea. So when you tell someone a story, generally you want to get them interested from the beginning. So if you're at the bar last night and you're telling some story about something, you'd start with something that'll get the attention of somebody. And I sort of look to make writing conversational first and everything else pretty much second. sort of related to my idea of stealing a headline from William Faulkner or whatever. If I'm, this is sort of an aside, but if I'm actually designing before I have the copy for something, I'm not a big fan of using Greek text, lorem ipsum. I will take text from a novel I wish I had read. So, like Charles Dickens' Great Expectations or something, and I'll take a few paragraphs and use that text in the layout because it sort of forces me to interact with that text as I'm doing the design. So that's sort of the looking through the other end of the telescope of the headline thing. So basically, I steal from literature wherever possible. So unstuck. In the way that the process that I use is that I don't get stuck that much because I've got this big blob of text that I start with, and when I get to a point where I don't know where to go, or if I've written myself into a corner, I immediately go back to the beginning and start fixing the grammar errors and fixing spelling and deciding where paragraphs should go and rewriting sentences, and I go back through the whole thing. So by the time I get back to the place I was stuck, the piece is essentially different, and usually I can just plow through and continue on. But like anything else, if you really get stuck, it's just leave it alone for a minute. I think is the best thing. You go on and check Twitter or something, and then come back. And you'll find that you don't remember what you were saying at all. So. Yeah. Unlike John and Michael, I work with the staff, and that's a great thing because when you're done with an article, you can hand it to somebody else and say, "Will you read this for me?" And for me, that is a great luxury, and to be able to proof other people's work as well. I think it's quite difficult to do it on your own. I find it quite difficult to do it on my own. And the next thing sort of related to is I'm, as sort of admitted already, a terrible procrastinator. And so I don't have any leftovers, and I never write for spec. Like, if the thing has to be done at 4, it's a fair bet I started it at 2:15. And so generally I'm writing something to be done. So I don't have an idea file. I have notebooks full of notes that I don't understand. And I continue to make them. And it's got to the point where now that I just make them and I never go back and look at them again, but I still, here's this great idea for this article, and I look at it and I have no idea what I was talking about. So, and finally, how do you know when you're done? I've told this story at a South by before, or used this quote before, but it's relevant. Somebody asked Truman Capote, who was a serial reviser, how he knew when he was done with a novel, and he said that it was quite simple. It's when the guy from the publishing house comes over and grabs the manuscript. So the lesson in that is that maybe you're never done. And in these days, the way that most of the stuff is published on the web, you are in fact never done proofing the article. I mean, nothing's more frustrating than finding a glaring typo in an article that's been sitting on the web and linked to 100 times over the last 2 years. So, when you're writing for print, it's a different thing. We're writing the copy for Field Notes or something we're going to print 500,000 copies of. That's a whole different animal in terms of the proofing process. And I wonder if that web, everything's always live and everything's always editable, if that's necessarily a good thing. I'm not sure. And then finally, one footnote is I've hired a lot of writers over the years and a lot of art directors and a lot of coders, and my advice stands: if you're interviewing 2 people and they have equal skills and they're equally qualified for the job, hire the girl who can write. Because being able to write is a sign of an organized mind, and writing is a tool that is not usually learned well late. So, okay, so that's it. So now we'll go back through the slides.
Okay.
I was hoping that you were going to do like a Truman Capote impression.
We'll wait for the Q&A. Yeah, no.
We can do it then, John. We can do it later.
Wait, how are you supposed to read one? Okay. That one? Okay, good.
Oh man, right on time.
Exactly. Well done, sir. So we just learned that I spelled something wrong. Thank you.
Like I said, that we're never done revising and we're never done editing. So
thank you, Josh. You're awesome. Good morning. It's really an honor you guys are all here. I'm barely awake. My name's Michael Lopp. You might know me as Rams. Spelled correctly now.
Who caught it? Who noticed that this was spelled?
Oh, everybody.
Yeah, because who else would come to a writing thing on Sunday morning at South by Southwest?
My name's Michael Lopp. I've written a couple of books. One called Managing Humans, which is about managing humans. It's sort of a engineering's guide to figuring people out and taking care of human beings. I wrote another book called Being Geek, which is sort of a career handbook for nerds and geeks. All of that content really came from Rands and Repose, which is a blog that I write. And the reason there's a blog and the reason I'm sitting here is my mom, because I just realized this morning as I was freaking out about this and pacing around my room, was like, I read my entire life. And if you want to be a writer, you read. And it's just there's always a stack of books next to the bed. All summer, books, always sitting in front of me. And that's if I had to pick a thing that made me a writer, it was actually that. I've been at Apple. I was at Apple for 8 years and managed to not get fired by Steve Jobs while doing a lot of writing as well. So I've done quite a bit of stuff. So this is going to be a totally different talk than what Coudal just did. So giving yourself an assignment, what this really means to me is where does it come from? Where does the original idea come from? And I would love to say there's some rule, but it's just sitting there and kind of being open to it, which sounds kind of hippy-dippy. But it's true. The thing is you're sitting there just kind of waiting. I find ideas in the car. I find ideas in the shower. I find ideas drunk with these guys sitting around doing whatever. But the point is, just you find yourself sort of finding that idea and going, oh, I actually care about that. That's kind of cool. It starts, it's a headline, it turns into an article, and you don't have a net. A lot of the writing I do, I'm going to maybe talk a little bit more about books than the weblog stuff, doesn't have a net. There's no one who is actually saying you need to get something done. With a book, I do have a net. Is Mary here? Mary, are you here? My editor from O'Reilly? Yeah, she was out late.
Why would she come?
You know what? You should hang out to dry. Tell them about the text.
All right, so Mary, you're here really? Okay. Anyway, so I got a text at 3 a.m. This is my editor, right? She's like, oh, come to the party at the O'Reilly thing, da-da-da. I text at 3 a.m. saying, yeah, I've got a meeting.
At 9 o'clock on Sunday.
At 9 o'clock on a Sunday, so I might be running a little bit late. 3 a.m. It's a time. It's actually the total insult, right? You know? Anyway, so she's not here. But when she is around, she is helping. I do have a net when I'm writing books. There's a lot of folks around me, whether it's an editor, whether it's a copy editor, whether it's all these folks who are actually making my stuff better. When I'm writing for the blog, there is no editor. Actually, I take that back. There is an editor. I actually pay someone for my blog, which I don't make a lot of money on, to actually do my editing, because I'm horrifically bad at spelling and grammar. So Melanie Baker, if you're here. Are you here, Melanie? No?
She had a meeting.
At 9 o'clock with the other one.
Anyway, I actually pay someone to actually do it because I'm really actually that bad. So I actually I pay for some nets. I get my writing done. You'll hear about this in a couple of slides. I'm a nerd, so I have a whole process to actually get started, right? And I do write all of my writing between about 9 and 11:30. That's it. I do a lot of other writing, but that's actually when the good stuff gets done. 9 o'clock, sit down, start reading something, read this guy's blog, read something to kind of get the words flowing through my head. Coffee kicks in, and then I'm going. But it's like an hour and a half, right? That's it. A couple of hours, 2.5 hours. But that's it, all day. If I could write all the time, that's all the time that I actually get it done. So I don't know what it is afternoon. I'm tired. Carbs are kicking in. I'm not sure what's going on there. But the point is, that's just the time that I know I can actually get stuff done. And when I'm actually writing a book, that's it. I structure my entire day around making sure that I optimize for that time. So there's a lot of folks that got to write all day. It's like, give it up. You're only going to get a couple hours if you're really working on something hard. I do 3 drafts for a piece being done in my head. Draft number 1 is I sit down and I write it, and we'll talk about how I get through that in a second. I write it, I get it done. It's to about 70%, and then I'm just tired of looking at the screen, so I print it out, context switch, go somewhere else, and edit it on the porch, edit it on the couch, do something like that. It's a completely different experience. We're not staring at the words on the screen anymore. And that's often when I find the big pieces that tie a piece together, that ties one idea to another. But you got to get it away and not be staring at the screen anymore. I take that and then I send it off to my editor. And this is really a content editor. She does spelling and grammar, but she also is aware of what my voice is and can actually help tie it all together. Get that feedback again, in Word, which I hate. Word is awful, but she likes Word, and you can do track changes inside of there. But again, another context switch, another kind of view on your words. So it's those are the 3 drafts to get it actually done. And then if there's for articles, for books, it goes through a whole other process. But to me, that's when it's about 80, 90% completely there. See, I went long on that one. Foolish consistencies. All right. I normally don't talk sitting down, so this is really hard. I'm a hand waver. I like to walk around and do stuff. Okay. So foolish consistencies. Again, I'm a nerd, which means the world does not make sense unless there are rules, right? Because otherwise, it's chaos, and chaos winning is a bad thing. So a lot of my routine is actually around kind of setting rules for like getting started. So I started talking to you right now, and my spine is like more straight. And I actually think that I'm a better writer now because my spine is straight. And that makes no sense to you, but it works for me. I have a hoodie. I'm a big fan of like kind of turning off the universe because the universe is loud and full of people and noise and gets in the way of my writing. So when I pull the hoodie up, I'm an even better writer, right? Where my mouse is, it's important. Where my copy's sitting, all of these things, all of these foolish consistencies are very important to me to being able to actually get started. So, and by the way, that's everywhere in my life, and it drives a lot of people crazy. Hello, Kino. The hook is, this is bigger than just writing. It's this is the thing, you said it really well, which is, what is the thing that's interesting about this thing that I'm about to build? And I don't actually start a piece until I find the hook. It could be the title is clever, it could be something is just that's there, but I don't really get started in something, and this is why I'm really bad with assignments, where they say, hey, can you write 200,000 words on motivating people? It's like, ooh. No, right. So it's that thing that is actually there. And writing for Rands, I've got a couple hooks that I'm fond of. For those of you who don't know my writing, I do a lot of I write about people at work, right? Which is kind of problematic because sometimes I'm ripping on them and sometimes I'm giving them some positive stuff. But what I do, and this is like at Apple too, which is like a really risky. But what I do there is I actually take the characters and I sort of mix them together, right? There's a guy named Fez, right, who's the guy, that engineer who is totally he's just drifting in his career, right? And, it's not actually that one guy that I'm really actually writing about. It's the 3 pieces of all those people I've seen before. And what it does for me and for the writing that I've seen in terms of audience reaction over time is that it makes it approachable, right? So my hook usually is, who is this person that I'm going to construct that is going to make this topic familiar to you, right? So that's one of my hooks is always finding sort of the character, that person and the piece that you can relate to. More often than not, people talk about the people in my articles than the actual titles. Another hook that I'm really fond of is sort of turning. One of the pieces I wrote was a piece called the Nerd Handbook, and the Nerd Handbook is basically an explanation of why we are who we are as nerds. Which sounds sort of interesting, but what I did and what I think is really interesting is that I turned it around and I wrote it for the significant others of nerds as opposed for nerds, right? So I said, hey, Amy Jane, this is why Gruber is this way. Now it's true, which means I doubled the size of my audience, and here's why. Because he handed it to her and said, hey, this is why I'm this way, but the thing is sort of the people, not even the significant others liked it, but the people, it sort of gave them this way to like look at themselves as nerds and say, well, like, he's not really talking about me because it's really talking to this other person there. So it was sort of interesting. It was a way to kind of twist it around and make it sort of a different way to look at the piece.
Or perhaps it was rationalizing compulsive behavior.
That's totally, absolutely, yeah. And putting it at a distance, totally, absolutely. I still can't believe this is spelled right.
It is spelled right.
Okay. The lead. This is headlines to me. I think we all 3 of us share sort of a love of a great 3 or 4 word headline that just comes together. You're like, oh, fucking nailed it. I generally find these about a third of the way through the piece. Just as a little trick, when I can't write something, when I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here at South by Southwest, I'm a little bit hungover, and then I want to say this other thing, but I don't have the words yet. I use square brackets to kind of keep the momentum going, right? So I'm like da 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 da, blah blah blah, hangover, square bracket, right? So that's the thing is about, this has nothing to do with lead, but it's like that's the thing that I do to actually keep the momentum going, is just kind of give myself permission to be vague, right? So I'm a big fan of that. And I do it with headlines too, because I don't really feel like the piece is done until the lead is there. You ready? Okay. All right. Unstuck. This is usually when someone gets up and gives you all these tips and tricks about how to like get past writer's block. And I was again thinking about this last night. And the one thing you got to do is you got to leave yourself open to the idea that what you're currently writing is a piece of crap. It's okay. You're very attached to it right now. You're sitting there, you're writing that thing. It's like feeling really good. You're going about 3/4 of the way through, and it's like, oh God, something's wrong here. I'm like, what's going on here? I'm stuck. I'm writing myself into a corner. And you can go away. You can do context switch. You can do these other things that I want. But at the end of the day, there is a chance you could be writing crap, right? And it's a big thing to say to yourself, well, I had fun doing this, but no one will see this. And I have a lot of that sort of stuff. Other than if you have something that you think is still good and you don't think it's crap, one of my favorite moves is the context switch, walking away, printing it out, going somewhere else, doing something where you're in a completely different mindset. Walking away is a big one. The other one that I do that's really works for me, especially when I'm on a deadline, is I rewrite the last 3 paragraphs before wherever I stopped, even if they're fine, right? It just gets me started with stuff that feels like safe, and it feels like a little extra work, but it just starts that momentum again. It's actually getting started and kind of going through it. And that's one of my favorite ways to get unstuck.
So you back up to where you were and start over, get a running start?
A running start. It's runway, right? Yeah, cool. Exactly. Proofing, as I already said, I'm really a horrible speller and a grammar person, as we've already seen in these slides. I brought in outside support to actually pull this stuff off. So I think it's really important. I mean, it's like I like this like crew of people that follow me and send me little notes like, hey, you spelled this wrong. These are like some of my favorite people after I posted something, and because I want it to look great. I really want it to be there, which is why I have editors. But those are mails, as we talked about yesterday, that I always answer. It's like, thank you. I didn't know it. That's awesome. You're great. And my piece is now better. When I started writing about 6-7 years ago, I always had this dream of dying, and they're going through my stuff. They go in my closet, and there's like these stacks of notebooks and all this stuff that I wrote that never got published, right? And for just a lot of years, I was sort of like Jim in that it's like everything that I wrote was actually getting done. And somewhere in the last 5 or 6 years, and maybe this is it's okay to write crap. I have about 60 unfinished articles sitting in my Dropbox folder right now, like 60. I counted yesterday, right? 60. That's a huge amount of writing that I have never done, right? I mean, that I've never actually published. And maybe the last 10 are ones that are in play right now, but there's 50 pieces there that are just sitting there. And they'll probably never actually get published. But to me, I kind of look at that, and I feel like I'm becoming a better writer because I'm not so attached to every single word. There's always more that's going to come there, right? And I like that pile that's kind of getting better and bigger and bigger. And at some point when I die, maybe they'll go sync my Dropbox and see something else there.
You should make sure you have a long account.
Right. I'm an engineering manager. I write a lot about engineering management. And there's the reason engineers are really, really bad at schedules. How many engineers in the room? How many writers in the room? How many people love Macs? All right, okay. We're amongst friends. Anyway, the reason engineers are bad at schedules, and this has to do with writing as well, is that when we see it done in our heads, when we've solved the problem, we think it's done, right? It's like, oh, I can see it right there. It's like, okay, yeah, it's 3 days. It's like, it's not 3 days. It's 3 days to like just describe it there, and there's everything else that actually needs to be done. I'm totally the same way with writing. I'll be 3/4 of the way through, and there's this magical moment. It's as magical as finding the idea where you can see the ending, right? You're like, and you're maybe 3,000 words away from an actual ending, but you can actually see it. I climbed the mountain, I can see all the way down the path to the ending right there. That's the thing I needed. That's the thing for me that I know when I'm done. There's still a huge amount of work there, but it's very gratifying because it's actually come together and it feels like a coherent whole. So And then Footnote, we were actually going to talk about Footnotes, but you went with like a whole like thing. Yeah. Footnotes, I love Footnotes. This guy's probably going to talk about them more. I think they're clever, and the only reason I don't have them on my site is I just haven't taken the time to do the CSS. So, anyway, so thank you guys. John Gruber? Is that right? Oh my God, solid.
So where are we?
You're number one.
I'm very, very impressed that people came to this. I'm impressed that we came. So I'm John Gruber. I just quit as an editor at Engadget. So if anybody's hiring, let me know. No, I write a site called Daring Fireball. I suspect several of you are familiar with it. But it's a site, if you're not, it's a weblog. It is my full-time occupation. I have no staff, and I have no bosses. It's just me in a spare bedroom in the house by myself. Which, you could probably go. So I realize, thinking about it, and, I try not to get too caught up in it, but thinking about like what I do in a meta sense like that, I don't know. I'm not a very introspective person. Would you agree? Yeah. I'm not very considerate either. But it's a weird. Nobody used to be able to do what I do, which is I don't answer to anybody. I never have to pitch an idea. I never have to ask permission to write something, and nobody ever makes me write something. And yet, this is all I do is write, which is all I've ever wanted to do. I'm very, very happy with what I get to do on a day-to-day basis. But as a short-form writer, somebody who writes either really little links or, the longest thing I write is still just article length. I don't write books. That's like a new thing. Like, it never used to be that someone could make a living as a short-form writer without bosses, pitches. The life of a freelance writer is very, very difficult. Because before I was doing Daring Fireball full time, I tried it. It's horrible because you're pitching for work, and it's hard to get articles, and it's competitive, and they don't pay well, right? It's just not a very lucrative endeavor. So now, but I think some people. And Jim, I think, has asked me this too, is it the opposite problem, though? If I can write anything, do I have problems deciding how do I choose what to write? And I can't explain it. I have no explanation for it whatsoever. Same thing with what do I link to for the links. There are no rules. There's no, can't explain it. I wake up and I start reading stuff and I think that's interesting or that's funny or, ooh, that's important, and then I link to it. And how do I decide when one of them should become a full article? I don't know. And it is also a weird thing, because now for me, when I write the links, and if you're familiar with the site, there's the two fundamental types of posts to Daring Fireball. A little link, here's a link, please go read this thing, go bring their web server down. And here's my little, sarcastic, lazy quip, and then the articles. And the articles kill me. Like, if the longer the article, it's not easy for me, and I'm miserable, and my wife can always tell whether I'm having a day where I'm just linking to stuff, because then I'm just farting around. And if I'm miserable, and she knows when I'm working on an article, because I'm just horrible person. And like when we were working on this, and Jim said, it sounds to me like you guys don't even like writing. and it's true in a sense. I'm miserable when I'm writing something big and something that I think is good. But I do it because the only thing that would be worse would be not writing it. Like, I have to get it out, even though it's horrible. So I guess next slide. Yeah. So without a net. So this has occurred to me too. And it ties right in with this one-man show thing. I started Daring Fireball in 2002, and I emailed a couple of it's like a weird thing. Like, if you're going to start a weblog, what do you do to even just get the first reader? I tell my wife, and there's one. But then what do? I don't know. It's like you kind of like, I guess I kind of went around, and every once in a while, if there was somebody who had an article on another website that was vaguely of the same topic, I'd maybe leave and I wrote about it, I'd leave like a comment and say like, hey, I wrote about this here or whatever. But I had like dozens of readers and then hundreds, and then it was like the whole boiling a frog thing where you put a frog in lukewarm water and slowly bring it to a boil. The frog never jumps out because you never notice it. But like now, boom, all of a sudden I do like 150.
What was that?
You've never heard this?
I'm just kidding.
All right. But now,
Appetizing Sunday morning.
now I do 150,000 page views a day, give or take. But I never noticed it because it's just one day after another, the growth isn't that much. But if you had gone back to me in 2002 and said, here's the keys to this website, you have 150,000 readers, write something, right? It would be terrifying. But it's occurred to me now that because I don't have to get approval, nobody double checks things before I post it, that if I like suffered a stroke or something and started writing like crazy stuff, like there would be nobody to stop me from just posting. Like there's no check. Like, so it has occurred to me that maybe I should give somebody like a kill switch for, next. So starting, I'm in a weird position. Again, it's sort of the format of the site where I almost can't be accused of procrastinating, because if there's a big long thing that I'm working on and I just don't want to start, then what I do is I go to Safari and start reading, farting around on the web, but I get to call it work because if I find something interesting, I link to it. And like there are some days where I want to be working on something big, but instead I spend a whole day farting around in Safari. But then it looks like I had a really productive day because there's like 20 posts on Daring Fireball. I can call it work. I do find, though, that the worst thing, and it is horrifying for me now, is when I take an assignment from something else. Like 2 or 3 times a year, I'll write something for Macworld magazine or somebody else, and I'll agree to it, and they like do the back page columns. They'll like work it out like 6 weeks in advance. They'll say like, hey, this is like maybe like early October. We're doing a Future of the Mac issue for January. So like in December, would you be interested in doing a column? And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And then it like comes up, and then they give me like the tap like that was due yesterday, and I'm like, ooh. And then I have to write this thing, and it's not the thing that's on my mind. And it's like, ooh, this is what it's like to have a real job again. And I have a hard time starting. But to me, the way I do it is I just keep, for any article, there's one text file in BB Edit, and everything associated with it goes in there. I have no other fancy software for, tracking everything. If it's a URL, if it's a note, if it's an idea, everything is in that one file. And to me, it makes it easier to start because there's that whole blank page thing. I never have a blank page at the start. I've got a mess of URLs and gibberish and notes and 2 words together and stuff like that. So it's easy to keep going. Do I feel a draft? I never write drafts. I always feel like when I start writing that it's going to come out perfect right out of my fingertips. And it never actually happens. But if I felt like I was writing a draft, it's like I can't get it up for it, so it's like it doesn't feel real. So I always feel like I'm like, this is great. I'm going to write this article. I'll be done in an hour. And the next thing I know, it's like 2 in the morning, and my wife is like, yeah, nice seeing you today. I'm like, ooh, I told you I was going to be done 6 hours ago. Next. So, foolish consistencies. This I have one. Anybody who reads the site, every once in a while I mention it. But I use my keyboard at my desk is an Apple Extended Keyboard 2. How many people remember this? All right, this is a keyboard that Apple stopped making in 1991. The retail price, if you wanted to buy one back then when they were new, and this is in $89, $90, was $169. And it was worth it. It is a very loud keyboard. But I feel I write better with it. I do. I don't know why. I just feel like now this is a man's keyboard, right? This is a keyboard, This is built like a tank. Like if somebody broke into my office, I could use this keyboard as a weapon to defend myself. That's something I work with. And my beloved one that I had since I was a freshman in college. And then here's the other thing. I'll go back even further. Is when I was a freshman in college, I went to Drexel University, and I don't know if they still do this, but at the time they wanted every freshman to have a computer, a Mac. And so my parents bought me, that was my first Mac that I owned. It was a Mac LC, and it came with this real piece of shit keyboard. It was horrible. It was like real squishy, terrible, and I was very disappointed in it. And one of the other computers you could get that year was the SE30, and the SE30 came with the Apple Extended Keyboard too. And so I won my Extended Keyboard 2 in a game of John Madden football for the Sega Genesis against the other guy in my dorm. It was like our dorm championship game for Sega. And I forget how much, I put up a bunch of money, I think, against his Extended Keyboard 2 and won it. So I kind of felt like it was like my Millennium Falcon. And I really loved that keyboard. But then about 3 or 4 years ago, the E key finally broke. And I guess that's because I write so much, because E is like the most common letter. I mean, it kind of makes sense. I don't know. That's what I told myself. But but to see, the thing is at some point later in the 90s, I got a new computer, and it came with the Extended Keyboard 2. It was like the last computer Apple made that shipped with it. And I'd never opened it up. It was sitting in my closet, like mint condition. So I don't know. I think I'm set for about 20 more years. So the hook. I don't know what to say about this. I feel like every time I start an article, I want there to be a hook. I want there to be some kind of, this is the one where I blank. But I think, I guess that's, to me, it's like having a hook for an article is the whole thing that makes me want to write it. If I can't think of a hook, then I just don't do it. I will spend, I would easily, I love to have the first sentence right. But even better is to have the headline. If I can think of a good headline, I will write the article. So like last week or 2 weeks ago, sometime in the last 2 weeks, there's this whole thing with Apple and their new subscription pricing stuff on the App Store, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't going to write an article about it. I decided, I don't know, this App Store stuff and complaining about, the money, it bores me. But then I thought of the title, Dirty Percent. And all of a sudden I had this title, and I thought, I have to write an article where I use that headline. And that's the whole reason I wrote the article. And absolutely wasn't going to write it, and I came up with that headline. I was like, I got to use it. My favorite, no, go back. I wanted to do this. Here's my favorite headline in the history of Daring Fireball. This is the actual headline for the article. Yet another in the ongoing series wherein I examine a piece of supposedly serious Apple analysis from a major media outlet and dissect its inaccuracies, fabrications, and exaggerations point by point, despite the fact that no matter how egregious the inaccuracies / fabrications / exaggerations, such pieces inevitably lead to accusations that I'm some kind of knee-jerk shill who rails against anything anti-Apple simply for the sake of defending Apple, and if I love Apple so much, why don't I just marry them? By far and away, but because, and that is exactly what I was thinking, because there was this, it's just some piece of shit article, but I hated it, and I wanted to say why it was wrong, but that's exactly, but the headline said more than the actual article did, because the headline said something about like what I actually do. Yeah. So Unstuck. This is my one trick. I have this trick where I do everything in BB Edit, and 98% of the time I'm in BB Edit. It's like a dark gray background with white text. But if I'm stuck,
that's a surprise.
Right. If I'm stuck, though, I have another color scheme for it with a light gray background and black text, and I'll switch, and I feel like sometimes that can get me going. But again, then it's like I'm sort of entering Ranzian crazy town, where got to have my coffee, 2 inches over here.
Ranzian crazy town.
Nice.
Proofing. I find that I cannot proof, and this is one of those things where because I don't work with anybody, I have to proofread my own stuff. I can't proofread in my editor. I can go back up. I can think I'm finished and feel like all the notes are gone, all the gibberish is gone, everything is a paragraph, and I've added all the links. Go back up to the top and start reading. When I'm in BB Edit, though, it's like I'm in editing mode, and I can't read it. It's like I start reading each sentence, and I know, well, that's the sentence with this, that's the sentence with this. I can't do it, so I have to do something different. If it's long, I print it out. And that, to me, is how you edit. I don't know. I feel like that sort of dates me. I feel like there's a lot of people that don't even own printers anymore. Or if I'm going to edit on screen, I have to do like a preview in BB Edit and make it look like a web page, just to find it and read it. And to me, it's a big. I don't know. I think a lot of other writers are like that too. But I feel like you just have to see it in a different context to actually be able to read it rather than just think you got it right. Leftovers. I used to have them. I have like a big pile of like ideas and half-written articles for Daring Fireball, but they almost all date back to the time when I wasn't doing it full time. And the whole reason they're half-written is that they were the ones I wanted to write, but just couldn't because the responsibilities of having a day job prevented it. And so I don't know, and I never look at them because I feel terrible about all of them because they were all ones I wanted to write. But I of course can't throw them out. Knowing when you're done, I don't know. I don't know how to explain that because for me, I am a perfectionist, and maybe if I wrote books, I'd be like a Truman Capote type who they'd have to come and take it away. But because I don't. There's this tension that I feel where, on the one side, yes, I have a perfectionist streak and I kind of want to just work on something forever. But on the other, once I hit publish, it's up there and people can tell me how awesome it was, right? I mean, it's a vain endeavor. And so you get that, it just suddenly the overwhelming urge, like, I got to get this up there, this is ready, it just I don't know, it's like a sixth sense that this is good enough. To hit publish. One thing I do too, I will say is I know a lot of other sites like all the AOL ones, like the Gadgets and all those guys. They have this like complicated system for staggering their posts. Like they'll these are sites that have a bunch of writers, but they have like an actual thing like where the writer will hit publish. But it doesn't go online. It goes into a system that makes sure that like there's a new post every 20 minutes or something like that. And that's crazy to me. When I hit publish, I want that thing up there on the web immediately because I need to go read it on the actual website just to make sure it's right. So footnotes. How are we doing on time? Good?
Yeah. Pretty good.
I have to admit, and it's almost embarrassing to say so, that one of my favorite writers is David Foster Wallace, and the guy is notorious, infamous almost for his use of footnotes and endnotes and stuff like that. And I enjoyed them so much. I don't even think I could emulate his writing style, even if I tried. But I admire him so much that, it's my one little bit of, homage to David Foster Wallace to at least by the standards of the web, using pretty many footnotes. And I think, like in general, footnotes often get a bad rap. It's like boring, and it makes it's like they're associated with like academic writing or anything with footnotes is, somehow people have gotten the idea that they're boring. I like to do the opposite, like. And usually 9 times out of 10, it's when I make a footnote, it was in parentheses. It was something I put in parentheses in the middle of a paragraph. And my rule of thumb is if it's good, like, wow, that's a pretty good thought or observation, the better it is, the more likely I am to put it down at the bottom in a footnote, because to me that makes it more fun. It's like... it's like the writing equivalent of like the prize in the Cracker Jack box. You buy it for the candy-covered popcorn and peanuts, but, at least when I was a kid, the prizes used to be a lot better in the Cracker Jack box. Isn't that it? It's like a crying shame what they've done to Cracker Jack. And I just feel like having something good, like really good, or sometimes like the best. If the best thing in the article is in a footnote, to me that's a total win. And that's
it. So that's 12 slides times 3, and we have a few minutes. I guess, anybody have any question about anything about what we talked about or anything else, really? And then we'd be glad to take a whack at them.
Yeah.
Why do you all write in BB edit?
Why do we write in BB Edit?
I don't write in BB Edit. I write in text. I write in text editor. I write in the most simple tool that I can find because knobs and dials confuse me.
I don't know why I do. I write in BB Edit because the only 2 places I write are BB Edit and in my mail client. So I just don't like Word. I've tried all of these apps that sort of black everything out on your screen and allow you to focus on one thing, and I'm just like, oh, I got to check the Twitter feed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can't fool myself. So I don't know. For me, it's a simple, empty environment that doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles.
Right, and for me, it's just familiarity. Like at some point in the 90s, BB Edit, when BB Edit came out, I was on a Mac. I needed a text editor. It was, at the time, clearly the best text editor. And now I know everything about it, so I'm never going to switch.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, thanks everybody for coming, especially on this morning.